Today is day 247th day of the full-scale Russian war against Ukraine. I am Vasil Somasvalo. We are talking to Andriy Demchenko, who is the spokesperson for the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. My first question concerns the situation in different parts of the border, the occupied territories. We are also interested in the Belarus region and the western border. Thank you. As for the carrying out of the orders by the State Border Service of Ukraine, we are continuing to bravely defend Ukraine in the hostilities area and also providing the security of the border, where the situation still remains quite tense. We are resilient in our defense, both in the eastern part of Ukraine as well as in the south. We are constantly being shelled, and together with the armed forces of Ukraine, we are taking all the comprehensive steps to rebuff the Russian aggression. In the direction that you have mentioned, we are defending the territory and are complying with the stabilization actions. The general plan of defense is drawn out by the General Staff of Ukraine. As for the Russian-Ukrainian border in the regions of Chernihiv and Sumy, Russia unfortunately continues their unprovoked shelling. In the occupied territories, we see constant shelling. The enemy also uses the firearms, artillery, and more often than not, we have witnessed the aviation sorties. And of course, they are using UAVs. This is a threat not only to the defenders, but also to the civilians, because their housings are bombed, damaged, and people, of course, are suffering, including the civil infrastructure. The majority of the shelling has been suffered by the Sumy region. We have noticed more than 250 shellings of this territory, prevailing by the artillery and mortars. Together with other forces, we are taking all the necessary steps to defend the border in this region, including the engineering steps and other actions. We are surveying the territory, putting up the checkpoints and other measures. As for the Belarus region, at this point, we don't see any aggravation. The situation is under control. The Belarus-Russian forces are continuing to amass their strength in the Brest region, but their number has not been drastically changed. The detachments are being constantly rotated in that area. Unfortunately, Belarus does not stop supporting the armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine, providing their territory, their airspace and infrastructure to the aggressor forces. We are under the constant threat of rocket and aviation bombings, including the unmanned aerial vehicles. We also see the aggravation of the situation, given the fact that they have started to combine joint forces and the Russian aggressor forces are coming to Belarus. At this point, we don't see any assault capability from Belarus to Ukraine, but the action they are undertaking are being carried out on a constant basis. Ukraine is well aware of the fact that Russia is trying to drag Belarus, into this full-scale war. But the Belarusian authorities are trying to swap the responsibility and are blaming that Ukraine is threatening Belarus. At this area, the threat is constant, and all the forces of security forces and defense forces of Ukraine defending the Belarusian border are ready for any development. As for the borders with the aggressor country and Belarus, as well as the border with Moldova in the Transnistria area, is a piece of the border where the state border guard and armed forces are paying special attention to prevent the aggravation or escalation of the situation. If there is a worsening of the situation, we will be ready to put up the fight. All the components of the defense forces have been mining the territory and putting up engineering constructions, all the actions that have to be taken there in case of the possible invasion have been taken care of. As for the border with Moldova and the EU, the traffic is not that dynamic. We see that about 70 to 90,000 persons are coming or leaving Ukraine. In terms of percentage points, it's about 50%. That is to say that we don't see any significant difference between incoming or outgoing flow of people. After the massive attacks of Russia, by Russia of Ukrainian territory, we haven't seen any drastic increase in the traffic of people. For example, we have seen that 75,000 persons are leaving Ukraine. Previously, the level was at somewhere near the 90,000. As for the cars and vehicles, in comparison with the month of August, in September, the traffic in general has decreased by 10%. The passenger traffic difference has not been noted, but the final results will be available a little bit later. In general, since 24th of February until September, at the crossing points, we have been checking people going into Ukraine. 11.1 million people left Ukraine. The border with Poland has seen more than 50% of those leaving Ukraine. The general rule now is that on the eve of the weekend, people tend to leave Ukraine more, but the difference is not that significant. On weekdays, we see that the passenger traffic coming into Ukraine is a little bit higher, but in general, it's a 50-50 correspondence. We advise members of the public to keep track of the situation. At some point in time, we can see some jammed traffic because there is a possibility that people will be gathering at a particular crossing point. You should go follow the situation online, which is available on the internet. On a special note, let me remind the public of the rules of leaving the country or for those coming into the country, not to be rejected right there at the crossing border points. Sometimes we note breaches of rule, and some of them are criminally liable. Not only administration responsibility is provided. About 150 people, as a general rule, are rejected the right to leave the Ukrainian territory. Most of them are people who are just these are men subject to military service. Unfortunately, we see continuing attempts to cross the border illegally. Dozens of perpetrators are detained. I'm talking about 30 to 40 people at the crossing points when people are using sham documents, or sometimes in the area that is called green patches of the border, when people either individually or in groups are trying to cross the border illegally. Beyond the crossing points, we have detained about 7,000 people, and 1,300 were detained at the checkpoints. The perpetrators are very active in illegal attempts to cross the border to Romania and other countries. Beyond that, our rescue and research teams are exposing different sham schemes that provide illegal channels to leaving Ukraine. We have exposed dozens of such cases. Thank you. Do we have questions from the floor? Ukrinform. You have mentioned the rules of crossing the border. Have these rules been recently changed regarding the people eligible to cross the border of the country in the time of war? These rules have been clearly defined in the relevant documents, including people who are eligible to crossing the border, including men in the times of martial law, those men who are aged between 18 to 60 years of age. This is where you have a very specific instructions of whether you are eligible or not. Recently, I'm talking about a month and a half approximately, a number of adjustments have been introduced into legislation. First of all, they are associated with the people who are accompanying disabled persons or children underage. As for the latter point, you could be convoying or escorting a person with disabilities only once a year. We have now seen the relaxed rules. You can cross the border more than once, provided that the person you are guardian of stays abroad and is taken in, have been enlisted in our embassies abroad. As for the Marines, there are a lot of checks here allowing people to leave the Ukraine, either you're employed there or other circumstances. As for the students of higher educational establishments, they are not allowed to leave the country in the conditions of martial law. Now, the load for the State Border Guard Service is growing, including the western part of the country. There is a problem, as you mentioned, at the green patches of the border. How much do you think there is a need for the State Border Guard personnel to be increased? At this point in time, we are well manned to carry out all the challenges. As for the deoccupied territories, we see that Russia does not stop their terrorist attacks. It's not about defending the border, but rather protecting it. And the State Border Guard enjoy the honor of rebuffing the aggressor firsthand, and we were there to rebuff the aggression. So, of course, we want to live up to our challenges the best we can and to be ready for any development of the situation. As for the western part of the border, the infrastructure that was there prior to 24th of February, in the first place, I'm meaning the long-haul truck drivers, You see, the Ukrainian seaports don't function the way they used to do before the war. Of course, infrastructure is overloaded. We were not ready to face up such a challenge. So we found ourselves in a situation when we were quite challenged. The Customs Service and the State Border Guard Service are doing our best with the help of our colleagues beyond the border to ensure that the procedures are sped up and simplified for the trucks to go through the border or to make easier for people to cross the border. Of course, the infrastructure will have to be adjusted. We are now building new facilities at the border with the Romanian and Poland territories quite in the shortest time. I think it will help to ease the traffic in the first place at the Polish border, because the traffic of passengers is most serious there. Thank you very much, sir. We've been talking to the spokesperson of the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. At 1300, we'll be talking to Sergei Ignat, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian